So somebody else who's about to come into this maelstrom, and we're going to see how this goes for her, is Amy Coney Barrett. And, of course, she's the judge who President Trump has nominated to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. She's 48 years old and has 7 children. Now, can you even imagine that workload? I mean, 7 children, and she's a judge on a pretty important appeals court right now, the 7th Circuit. That's one of the big ones. You know, it's probably not the biggest. I mean, 9th Circuit's important. 11th Circuit, I think, is very important. But the 7th Circuit is definitely one of the 2nd Circuits also. Oh, a lot of them are important, but the 7th Circuit is one that's very important. It has a lot of famous judges from the past, a lot of interesting decisions, highly associated with the University of Chicago, thought process, law and economics, some of the decisions coming out of the 7th Circuit. So that's where Judge Amy Coney Barrett has sat for the last several years since she was appointed and approved, although by not a huge margin. She was approved to that. But I think she's getting ready to face her own trip into the maelstrom. And what are they going to attack her on? That's the thing. Are they going to pull out her high school yearbooks and her high school calendars and say that she went to a party sometime and made out with a boy or something? I don't think so. I don't think they're going to be able to front that kind of attack that they brought against Kavanaugh. So what are they going to attack her on?
Well, I've already heard one of the Hollywood critics saying that she has a really annoying voice.
Oh, there's a good one.
Ooh.
And I heard somebody say that, you know, her name is evocative of Coney Island, which has a lot of positive connotations to it, and she's trying to steal the glory of Coney Island by having that as her middle name. You know, that right there, I mean, she's been her parents were setting her up for this Supreme. They're like, you know, what should we name her? Well, I guess that was probably her last name. But in any event, you know, that's really planning ahead right there if you're doing that. And maybe she could have picked something a little bit better than Coney Island. I've never been to Coney Island, but I understand it's a nice place. They have good hot dogs there and everything. So, you know, this is going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be fairly fast. We've already heard from Lindsey Graham that the committee hearings are going to start on her on October 12th, and that he expects to vote her out of committee and send her up to the full Senate to Speaker McConnell, who will have to schedule a vote on her before the full Senate by October 22nd. Now, we don't know that the vote will be scheduled by then, but that'll give them a period of time before the election to schedule and conduct the vote on her. Now, she's got such an interesting and lovely family, and this is one of the points on which the Democrats are attacking her, and that is that she has, like we said, 7 children. It's hard to imagine 7 children. That's a lot of responsibility. They're pretty young, too. I think the oldest is like 16, and the youngest, I think, is 5. 2 of them are adopted from Haiti, 1 boy and 1 girl. Vivian is the girl. They adopted her at 14 months. And John Peter is the boy from Haiti. They adopted him at the age of 3. And they've also got their youngest son, that's right, 5 to 16. Their youngest son, who's 5 years old, he has Down syndrome. And they've said that he is by far the favorite of all of his other siblings. And, you know, you hear that. Sweet. Yeah, you hear that a lot with Down syndrome children. And, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, if your child has some kind of a disability like that, you know, they think, you know, if they can identify it when the child is in the womb, they think, well, you should get an abortion. Get rid of that. Get rid of that, you know, baby that's not perfect. Well, you know, and we've played some of the clips before from the Down syndrome young man who went and spoke before Congress and just said he was so glad that he wasn't aborted and, you know, that his life still had meaning. So, but you see a lot of parents, and I saw a young man who had Down syndrome with his mother in church a few weeks ago, and, you know, they're just so sweet and so loving. And I think a lot of families, you know, it's really kind of refreshing how innocent and, you know, out of step with normal times that those children can be.
I know families who have kids in the family, or maybe I even know grown adults who have a sister who's 50 years old who has Down syndrome, and they are better humans for having that family member as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'd be nice, you know, it's nice just to be on a simpler wavelength with somebody who just loves you, and it's not all complicated, and there's not a lot of other, you know, intentions and things going on. It's just more simplified. Well, Amy Coney Barrett graduated from Notre Dame Law School. She was first in her class, and she went on to clerk for Justice Antonin Scalia when he was on the Supreme Court. So that's one reason she's very popular among originalists and conservatives. She has espoused her judicial philosophy, which is that she does not believe that the Constitution is a living document. And we heard last week from Joe Biden when he was talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg about how she took her position on the Supreme Court to change the law. And that would be the opposite of the philosophy of somebody like Amy Coney Barrett. And she said, if a judge is not willing to apply the law but decide cases in a line in accordance with personal preference rather than the law, then she's not actually functioning as a judge at all. She's functioning as a policymaker. And I would have no interest in the job if the job was about policy making and about making policy decisions, she said. Her interest is in contributing to the tradition of judges upholding the law. So it's the province of the judge to say what the law is, not what it should be. And that's the exact opposite of the people who believe that the Constitution is a living document. And these are the same people. This was the philosophy that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has, that your position on the Supreme Court is to help the law to evolve, to change the law of the country, to be more just, to be better, to be more in line with what you think the law ought to be, rather than simply to interpret the law as written. She's going to face attacks based on her children. We've already heard that there was something wrong with the way she adopted her children from Haiti. You'll wait to see that. I bet you they even attacked the young man with Down syndrome at some level, trying to say that she's somehow making a play for sympathy by keeping him, because that's the same thing they've said about the young children from Haiti. And we'll get into a little bit of that when we come back in the next segment before we do our Out There.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show, and it's interesting as we learn more about Trump's Supreme Court Justice nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. A lot of people want to know the personal stuff. I've even heard some critics of the fact that she's adopted 2 children from Haiti. And so you hear about all of those things, but really what matters is how is she going to uphold the Constitution? And you've got a lot of insight regarding that.
Well, that's right. And, some of these critics, it's amazing what they're saying, because there's a guy, and he's kind of leading the charge. His name is Ibram X. Kendi. And, of course, his name used to be Henry Rogers, but now it's Ibram X. Kendi. And he wrote the book, which is apparently a bestseller, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And he's criticized her for adopting children from Haiti. In fact, for him, it's racist that she did that. In fact, he says some white colonizers adopted black children. They civilized these savage children in the superior ways of white people while using them as props in their lifelong pictures of denial, while cutting the biological parents of these children out of the picture of humanity. That's how he views what she did. I mean, if you look into her children when she adopted them, they were not terribly well. They had not been taken care of in Haiti. One of them was after the earthquakes and was in a bad situation. But her daughter had rickets and other problems, developmental problems. Nobody was speaking to her. She couldn't even speak. She was way undersized. She was like 14 months old, and she was still wearing clothes for 0 to 3 months. So she was malnourished, undersized. Now, she's grown up to be just fine. She speaks well. She's big. She's athletic. She's strong. So she's overcome that, but she's overcome it by living in the Barrett household and being raised there. And it's not because somehow they're being exposed to the superior ways of white people. They're just being taken care of, just like children are supposed to be. But this is the criticism, and it's unbelievable that they're going to criticize this person, this woman, for adopting children from Haiti. And they're going to try to make it into some kind of a prop. Just like we said, her name was some kind of a prop to remind people of Coney Island. I mean, it's insane to think that you would go to all that trouble and do that. I mean, I'm sure she had no real idea that she was going to end up nominated to the Supreme Court when she adopted these children, because that was back when she was just a top-notch professor at Notre Dame Law School, which she did after she had worked for Justice Scalia and a couple of years in private practice. But, this is all evocative of what they've done to a lot of these judicial nominees throughout history. And I'm thinking of Robert Bork. He's one that doesn't get mentioned often, but you can actually look it up, and the word Bork means to obstruct a political appointee or an appointee, to bork somebody. And that's what Ted Kennedy did with Robert Bork, who was unanimously approved to sit on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, but then was totally slandered during his confirmation process to the Supreme Court and wound up having his nomination withdrawn. I think he might have just lost the vote. But either way, whether they withdrew it, I know he lost the vote, but point is they were really unfair to Robert Bork. They were really unfair to Justice Clarence Thomas, if you remember that whole debacle, led by one Joe Biden. They were really unfair to Brett Kavanaugh, and there have been a couple of others, but those were the main ones that you think of. And is this what Amy Coney Barrett can expect during her confirmation process? Now, there's no real way that the Senate's going to be able to hold this up because the Republicans have a 53-seat majority in the Senate, 53 to 47. There are two senators who've indicated that they may not vote in favor of the nominee, although they haven't specifically said that. I think Susan Collins did say that specifically. Lisa Murkowski apparently is at least willing to meet with Judge Barrett. So Lisa Murkowski may not want to vote against her at the end of the day. I don't know. These are two liberal senators, liberal Republicans, and I think they feel like they need to please their base and their supporters, and maybe politically the best move for them is to vote against. I don't know. Point is, unless they lose one more, the Republicans have the 51-vote majority to confirm her. Even if they lose one more and it's a tie, 50-50, the vice president breaks the tie, right? So the Republicans will need to lose actually 4 to actually lose the vote. But one of the ones that was suspect that's left is Mitt Romney, and he's already said that he will support the president's nominee. Now, one other angle that they're going to come at her about is her Catholicism. She's a very devout and serious Catholic, and you need to understand attacks on her in this vein are unconstitutional because the Constitution says specifically no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. So you're not allowed to make it a test whether somebody's religious or of a certain religion or not. That's not allowed under the Constitution, so that is unconstitutional. And oh, by the way, what do you think that the 70 million Americans who are registered as Catholics, who are members of the Catholic Church in the United States of America, a full 22% of the population, how do you think they're going to take that kind of an attack on Amy Coney Barrett? Maybe they're going to take it a little personal. I guess we'll wait and see. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.